If we let our gaze wander across the endless infinity of the void, the mostly dark between the stars, it might pass over the occasional world or two, an indistinct shape, a blip of light in the nothingness of unlimited potential. And if the eye wanders long enough, perhaps eventually it settles on one particular pale dot and may even decide to rest here for a while to sharpen the view, however indistinct it may at first remain. What is it that we can see of this particular world that we bring into focus? Inching a bit closer, perhaps we see some land masses, some rivers, a set of islands. Perhaps we can even make out a name in our first inspection of the target. Doomed Alissar. An appropriate name because this world is doomed. It's a place of sword and sorcery in the most classical sense, finding itself entrapped in an eternal struggle between law and chaos. And just as we arrive, the cycle nears its end. Things are spiraling faster towards the culmination of this cosmic war of the two forces, set to determine once and for all which one will emerge victorious, irrespective of the fact that a victory, a total victory of either, spells a different kind of doom for the inhabitants of this particular world. In end times like these, champions emerge, champions of law, champions of chaos, and sometimes even the unwanted champion of an even more unwanted third, the grain of sand in the cosmic machine, the balance that ensures that total victory is not guaranteed for either side, and that perhaps even in this doomed world there is some hope for the people there, that in the absence of a total victory, after this apocalyptic culmination, a new cycle may begin. The rise of our champions makes for great story potential, where grudging anti-heroes follow the call of a runic sword to go on an epic quest and find inside some cursed tomb an even more cursed weapon with which the cycle is pushed further and further towards its resolution. And as we look deeper into this doomed Alissar, we can follow the trail of one of these stories, following the quest of one of these likely reluctant champions as they struggle for power, vengeance, or maybe even just pure survival. So what is it, this story that takes place here on Doomed Alissar? Where does it begin? Perhaps the answer is as simple as giving it a name. Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome to Oksana, Thief, Gladiator, Queen, a new solo RPG series taking place on Doomed Alissar and using the Black Sword hack, second printing, second revised edition from 2023 put out by the Merry Mushman, where they added a bunch of world-building tools and solo rules. And one of the first steps in the solo rules, well, actually the first step in the solo rules, is to simply pick a name for the solo campaign. The table is not the exhaustive lists of options, it's just a initial tool, and I thought it was good enough to just give us a head start and figure out what story we're going to be telling. And we've landed on a pretty classic sword and sorcery theme: the thief, the gladiator, the royal takeover, the classic Conan trifecta, so to speak. We're probably missing a pirate somewhere in between, but it's, I think, a non-exclusionary list of professions. And alongside character creation to figure out who this Oksana is in particular, we also have some tools to sharpen our view of this particular world. I picked the name out of a admittedly list of names for cities provided here. I initially intended to roll it, but then I landed on the name Alissar, which I thought was the most appropriate, and decided not to roll anymore. But everything else is going to be pretty much rolled wherever possible. We have, however, also a decision-making component here, because the world-building tools give us some prefab pieces, some broad stroke themes that we can scatter across our map here, which, by the way, is simply a kind of a inverted ripoff of the Young Kingdoms from Elric. I just needed a world map, so I kind of flipped it around and turned it upside down and traced the map edges a bit. And I've already prepared these elements for the eventual scattering here. Give you some examples: the Forbidden City, the Flotsam Kingdom, the City of Thieves, the Theocracy, the Pict territories. Naturally, can't have sword and sorcery without Picts. We also have a character sheet here, and we need to figure out who this Oksana is. It's at least nice to already have a name. Plus, the eventual destiny of Queen would suggest that we are dealing with a person of a mostly female persuasion. But beyond that, we have some rolls to make. This is a D20 roll under system, where a on or above the attribute score is a failure or a success at cost, whatever is appropriate for the situation. And a roll of 2d6 in consultation of this here table determines what our attribute score is. The attribute score will be adapted somewhat based on the backgrounds that we also get to determine. They add some bonus pluses to certain scores. So let us roll 2d6 down the line, starting with strength. A 6 and a 3 makes it 11. That's effectively a coin flip strength score, but it might go up. Dexterity, that's another 11. Constitution, that is a rather robust 12. Intelligence, that is another 11. Wisdom, that's a 10. And charisma, double 6. That's a 13. Okay, I guess we have the beginning of an inkling of an idea how we end up going from thief to queen, probably talking our way into the throne room. I don't know what you were thinking. However, charisma is not just persuasion, but also intimidation. So leaves it a little bit more open, depending on perhaps also whether Oksana is more of a barbarian doer or a decadent talker. Not that these are exhaustive cliches, but they are cliches. We do have our 3 origin types here, which is barbarian, civilized, and decadent. Since we have a 3, we roll a d6, and we do 1 and a 2 is the barbarian, 3 and a 4 is civilized, and well, 5 and 6, I'll let you figure that out for yourself. Decadent. Okay, well, the origin being decadent would suggest that maybe we are more persuasive than brutish, but you never know. They can also be, well, intimidating social barbs that we fire. So let's go down the die 20 line here to figure out what exactly our origin is. Maybe that tells us a little bit more. 3. Your character was born in a disreputable brothel of the City of Thieves. Well, the dice are being magical again. We have our Thief, Gladiator, Queen sequence from our story title. So starting off in a City of Thieves and in a somewhat reduced circumstances, I would say, fits quite perfectly. Let's give ourselves some backgrounds. We have 3 backgrounds in total, 2 of which come from our origin and 1 of which can come from either of the three origins, so we can take another third decadent one, we can take one of the other ones. We will of course determine it randomly, so I'll just roll for whatever category, same as with the origin, when the time comes. Initially, let's just determine the two backgrounds from the decadent origin. Unfortunately, there's 7 of them. I do not have a d7 at my disposal, so I shall roll a die 8 and ignore the 8. 1, 2, 3, Forbidden Knowledge. Well, that's a nice one. Forbidden Knowledge gives us knowledge of sorcery. We get 4 spells that we can randomly determine once we've determined the rest of our backgrounds. So let's continue with this. 1. Assassin. Unique. Okay, that is a unique origin. That basically means if we get another unique origin somewhere on one of the other tables, depending on how this goes on, we have to ignore it because we can't take 2 unique origins in the same character. The Forbidden Knowledge, by the way, raises our intelligence score by 1, and the assassin raises our dexterity score by 1, making both of them 12. Also, the assassin makes it so that we can hit really, really hard if somebody is unaware that we're there. Let's do the final origin before we determine the spells. So backgrounds, depending on which origin, we roll 1 and a 2 is barbarian, 3 and a 4, etc., etc. At 3, civilized, we have some civilized component to our character. That is 9, so we roll a die 10 and ignore the 10. We roll a 10. That is a 9, which is Sword Master. You can use Dex instead of Strength when making melee attacks with one-handed bladed weapons, plus 1 Dex. Okay, so our Dex is now a shiny 13, and we can use it to stab people, which is pretty good. Let's quickly determine our hit points. They are equal to our Constitution score, which is 12. Our Doom is a usage die 6. We'll get into that as we actually start playing. And we start by default with a d6 weapon and d4 unarmed damage die. We also have 100 coins for purchasing equipment, and we get 2 starting weapons. We'll do that equipment purchasing. I'll do that outside of the recording. That's a bit boring. But we do need to roll our weapons based on our origin table. Again, there are 9 origin weapons for a decadent, so we will roll 2, die 10, and ignore the 10. A 4 and an 8, a maul and a shiv. Okay. Sorcery, spell list, D100. There's quite a few of them. Let's get the first one. 08, call the id. You summon an invisible creature made of anger. It can remove a physical obstacle or inflict 2 die 6 damage before disappearing. That is pretty nice. Next spell is 93, war drums. The target is experiencing all the horrors of war. Roll a die 6. On a 1 to 4, the target panics. On a 5 to 6, they go berserk. That is some nice psychological manipulation. And another one. 43, Gloom Lullaby. Your target loses consciousness. A result of 1 on the spellcasting roll means the target will not wake up. Okay. Induce coma if you roll well enough. And finally, 99, Withering. Your target has the strength and vitality of a 90-year-old for the next die 6 hours. That sounds like kind of a nasty thing to do if you are progressing from thief to gladiator. If the opponent all of a sudden turns into Montgomery Burns. That is our character for now. We have pretty extraordinary dexterity, and we're quite intelligent and pretty charismatic, so some roguish type naturally emerges, particularly with the title, again, with the thieving part. Now, let us quickly refer to the solo rule chapter of the Black Sword hack. It says here to create our character after we chose the title, and then to create our world and decide where our prologue starts, which is about as far as we're going to get today, I think. Creating the world for the solo player is actually somewhat reduced from the regular rules. I'm following here the pattern of the regular group rules because I find them more fun. A solo player doesn't necessarily need a map. The solo player needs to decide where these pieces are in relation to one another. So really only determine like where are they roughly geographically and how far apart are their distances. But I like the map more, so we will just scatter this stuff over the map because that's more entertaining. Now, as I said before, these aren't necessarily clearly defined set pieces. Forbidden City, for instance, if we look here, this can be sharpened with a set of questions such as why is the city forbidden? Are the reasons political or religious or both, or is the city quarantined? And you have a 1d6 adventure seed kind of thing. Plus you also get to decide kind of the alignment of a few of the places in your world, pretty much the ones that are immediately important to your story or where you are designating the most power to them. Before we do that, however, we need to answer who is actually dooming this world, who is like the most outstanding champion of one of the powers who is now threatening the equilibrium, and are they aligned with law or are they aligned with chaos? Let's flip a coin here. 1 to 3 is a law antagonist and the rest is chaos. 2 is a law antagonist. Which particular law antagonist? 1d6. 3, the Silent Council, made of linked psychics. Okay, so that is our current chief trouble in the world, even perhaps if their machinations have not yet revealed themselves as like a coherent whole. We can already assume there are some scatterings of trouble in the various important places of the world, and maybe that is the linked psychics doing their work as cult leaders and advisors to the king and all sorts of stuff. And I guess they're the Silent Council because they communicate telepathically. That would make sense. Now, the forces of the villains. What is their chief troop type? We can roll a d6. 5, an army of automatons built to look like grim angels. Now that I like. Let's now do our distribution. Maybe we can also kind of establish if there is such a thing as a central power base of the Silent Council. Maybe the Forbidden City, the first element that we drop on our map, is a preliminary candidate. Now, where do we put the Forbidden City? Instinct sort of says on an island or in kind of a remote spot. I think perhaps it goes here. That seems like a pretty good location. We have mercenary bands sort of forming like not really a central authority. Potentially, like there is a suggestion that there could be some big mercenary bands dominating the mercenary trade in this world, and that they have sort of their own territory carved out where they are more in their own almost lawless space. I would put that maybe on this spot here because that seems like a nice central location for them to reach a bunch of stuff. The Amber Enclave is next. There is a kind of a association there in the flavor text that they are somewhat new to this part of the world or to this world, and that they deal in kind of portals, teleportation, plane wandering, things like that. Let's maybe put them on this like inland sea island here. Then we have the Golden Archipelago. We really only have like one real archipelago on the map, which wasn't intentional, but I think I'll just drop it here. That makes sense. Is it golden because it's really, really rich? Probably. We don't know yet. We'll probably define that as we encounter it. The Northern Raiders, the name kind of gives it away where they should be geographically situated, probably. I think we're gonna give them this like landmass up here, which sort of pokes into the realms. The Merchant League, which dominates trade. I think that should probably be adjacent to the mercenary bands because I feel like they hire them quite a lot. So we put them here in that crook, in that little river estuary type thing. Brings to mind something like Venice, perhaps. The Flotsam Kingdom, which can be a lot of different things, but mostly like perhaps a sort of a seaborne island settlement of escaped indentured servants or slaves or whatever that are now turning to either self-governance, piracy, or both, putting them here on these islands scattered in front of this, like, what I feel like is a sort of a fertile river spot. The Eastern Principalities could be a bunch of anything. They might not even be on the map. They might be like really far away, but I'll just give them an outpost on this island here, and that's sort of how we interact with them and how they interact with trade in this area. The Pict territories, I'll put them up here. That gives them like their own spot to roam in. The Iron Horde, which is sort of a mobile army kind of thing, could be anything. Could be like a Mongol Magyar type deal. Could be something entirely different. We just know that they're like mobile forces. Maybe we have them push up down from the south here into this continent. The Land of the Black Pyramids, that is kind of automatically draws me to this big river here. It could be like a really ancient civilization. Pyramids, yes, you'd be in denial not to figure out who I'm referencing here. The Grey Spire's dominion is like literally big towering edifices with perhaps some magical associations. I'm thinking island perhaps again, maybe close to the Golden Archipelago. Put them here. The Last City of a Dying Species, that could also be like a non-human kind of thing that we put in this little U-shaped island up here. The City of Thieves, I think we might make that sort of a neighboring city to the Merchant League, maybe? And make this whole area more like a quasi-European-ish sort of deal, whereas the rest of the world perhaps isn't necessarily. Then we have a theocracy to still put on the map. Let me see what the prompts here are. I forget. Is this a land of repression, superstition, or ignorance, or the last refuge of art and knowledge? How many factions exist within the church? Are they conquest, isolation, or purification? Maybe they want to convert. Well, maybe we'll put them on the edge of like the Pict territory here. And they've carved out like their niche here, went across with the aim to like bring whatever it is in extreme form of the local religion down here to the Picts, and met with a mixed review, mostly mixed with their blood, I would say. And lastly, the Dust Empire goes, I think, down here, because we might have some sort of a desert type thing down here. That looks pretty consistent. That looks pretty good to me. Now, I think before we flesh anything out, because to really start our character off in medias res, as it were, like in the middle of the action, we don't really need to know much about the order or chaos alignment outside of perhaps our starting location, which is very, very likely the City of Thieves, unless our prologue says something completely different. So let's maybe first determine our prologue starting point before we do anything else, which is another die 6 roll. That's a 1. You just got out of your cell in your father's castle. City of Thieves, born in a brothel. Is that like a kingly indiscretion and we're like a royal bastard who is incredibly lock-upable for all her transgressions in the court? I think I may have to actually sit with this for a while, because that does change my view of the character a little bit. So if the king, the father, the castle owner at least, so it might not be the king, but some person that can at least afford a bloody castle, is our father, then we maybe had like a bit of a mixed upbringing where we're like drawn to the gutter, but we also Maybe that's how we learned the sorcery. How are we an assassin? It's like the ultimate form of rebellion kind of thing. I'm not sure. Or maybe we only have the skill set of an assassin. We haven't actually murdered anyone for hire yet, but we are equipped with all the skills of a murderer for hire. Yeah, I think this requires a bit of thinking time, and also this episode has gone on for quite a bit already. So this was kind of showing off the setup steps of building your setting and creating your character for a kind of predetermined titled game, Sword and Sorcery in the Black Sword Hack. And when we return with the next episode, we will zoom in on Oksana as she is released from the cell and perhaps sent on her merry way. Finally, she's overdone it and she's exiled from the city. Perhaps not even the city of thieves. Perhaps that's not where she's imprisoned. Perhaps she's been brought to the court of her father and now she's being pushed out as a failed experiment. We'll see next time. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then, and bye for now.